Welcome aboard. Welcome to Fishing Without Bait, a lifetime without definitive expectations, where we help people explode into their lives through full impact mindfulness. What we do is we're looking for people who are looking to create themselves, not to find themselves, because the life that you led is probably not something that you prefer to go back to. So what we deal with is the only three requirements that we have for entry is the honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness to try. And if you have a few pixie dust sprinkles of each one of those, you're on your way. I'm Jim Ellermeyer. I'm a behavioral health therapist, and today I'm joined by one of our eclectic roster of guests, Mr. Nick. Mr. Nick, could you tell us how you got to this point, and could you share with our audience where you're at geographically?
Absolutely. And let me start where I am at geographically. So I was born in Sweden, educated in Australia, and then I spent 20 plus years living and working in Southeast Asia as an expat, mainly working for the international firms, including American firms operating in the region. So that's a little bit about me. And why am I here today? Well, like many of the men I know in my circle, we all go through challenging times from time to time. And in my case, I hit rock bottom in 2015 as I resigned from a job and filed for a divorce, and the world was collapsing around me. And then I rebuilt my life from 2018 onwards, and that's why I'm here today.
Okay, so you felt overwhelmed, the world was squeezing you in, and you made what we would call a wise mind choice to separate yourself from a position that wasn't doing you any good.
Yeah, you could say so. Looking back at that time, I was doing really well in my corporate job, and everything looked fine on the outside. I was hitting my targets, getting the promotions, the bonuses, and doing everything that the society, my bosses were asking of me. But inside, I was not happy. I was in a job that wasn't really suitable for me, and more importantly, I wasn't vulnerable about the challenges I was facing. I wasn't asking for help when I faced some issues, and I tried to hold it all together. And eventually, it became too much pressure from that. And the way I dealt with the pressure was not to talk and ask for help. It was to go to the bar with my friends and increasingly drinking more alcohol. That was my way to numb my feelings.
Well, it's well known that alcohol it's a symptom, not the issue. I can get anybody clean and sober, Nick. I can change the wall, but if we need to find out what's driving that particular type of behavior. So what you're telling me is that there's a difference between pleasure and joy. Pleasure needs sustain. It's like eating potato chips. When you keep eating the potato chips, you feel pleasure, but once you set them down, there is no more pleasure. So you were getting a lot of external validation in your job.
Yes, certainly I was. And I thought it was what I had worked on. I say that the corporate world perhaps is something that we have to play a game, and I played the game well. I can say that I sort of almost elbowed my way to the top. I started as an account executive, then account manager, then it was account director, vice president, and then so on all the way up. And I could see how others have done it. And I just studied the system, and I worked as hard as I could. And during the time, perhaps I was an anxious overachiever. My way to prove myself to myself and to others was by working hard and delivering. I would prioritize work over anything else. And that was the space I was in for many years until it became my fall. And which is a fall that at the time was very painful. But looking back at it, it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yes, yes. So what we're talking about here is we're talking about the difference between pleasure and joy. And a lot of times people have lost what joy is. I've talked to a lot of people, patients, and they can't remember the last time that they felt joy. So what we try to do, Nick, is try to help people figure out what's important, because most things are not. So tell us about that journey of discovery for you, about finding out what's important.
Yeah. So if I'm looking back at in the corporate world, it was those external validations rather than anything. And then I just didn't have any real connections. I remember feeling lonely and isolated at work. I didn't really have anywhere I belonged to apart from at the local pub where I was working. And I didn't have much joy. Earlier days, I used to enjoy sport and belong to community, and I had lost that. Now in recovery, then and sober a bit more than 7 years, I have basically relived my life. Because I remember as a teenager, my parents would be driving me around to various activities. I would belong to various places. And I now double down on that myself. And I say that I have to parent myself and discipline myself to show up. Um, I have joined running clubs, swimming academies. I joined cycling clubs, and I really, really reach out as much as I can to find communities, to find the sort of tribes and places to belong. I also run a men's group now, not only for people who are in the 12-step programs, but also a men's group for men in general who want to be part of a community in a group and to practice, as I say, the vulnerability muscle. So that's where I get my joy these days. I get the pleasure from being of service, giving it back, and being a part of various communities.
I like that term, Nick, vulnerability muscles, very much. I call it having a man hat on. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll say, when you're with somebody of significance in your life, particularly your partner, take your man hat off. It's okay to do that.
Yeah, I like that saying. It's beautiful. And I keep saying also that we can indeed practice our vulnerability muscle and starting small. I keep encouraging my friends and men in the men's group to go back and practice. If they have a lunch or a dinner with a wife, why not ask them a few open questions? For example, how can I be a better husband to you? Or whatever it is. Be a bit vulnerable, open up, let the other party play a card back to you that perhaps they haven't had a chance to do before. And it's just about that small little opening up in all conversations with our friends, family, and colleagues, and so on, that sort of change everything. Because if you're asking those questions, you will ask them back, and then you have your chance to learn to be a bit open as well.
Yes, and being able to be an active listener. Sometimes, Nick, what I'll suggest to people, a person that says, listen, you did not marry your wife, husband, or significant other. You married your boyfriend, girlfriend, significant another. I said, my suggestion is to make, if let's say it's a female, to make your partner your girlfriend again. And I've never had a woman disagree with me, ever.
Yeah, I love that tip.
Because we didn't marry our wives, we married our girlfriends.
Yeah.
And active listening, Nick, as an executive coach and talking to these people, no one has ever learned anything by talking since dust. I imagine you opened up and became a excellent listener.
Yeah, and I would say that that's not something that we can just learn automatically. We need to learn it, and the way I done that is I studied coaching. I studied many hundred hours by now coaching over the last 5 years. I'm also studying now at the School of Positive Psychology to become a therapist and counselor. And through that, we also have modules which includes coaching and so on. So it is indeed about being a better listener. And what I thought before was just to listen is just to sit there and listen and really pay attention. But what I learned it's also about paraphrase, summarize, checking in that we got it right, to really demonstrate that we are a good listener, not just sitting there and listen, which is what I thought being a good listener meant before.
Well, to let them know that they are actually being heard. Nick, there's core emotional concerns. That's to be understood, to be listened to be respected, to be treated as an equal, be given the freedom to decide, and the ability to have active choices, the freedom to decide. And if someone isn't giving you those, I have to ask people then, what are you doing with them?
Yeah, I love that.
So everyone, we want to treat, as in the 12-step world, Nick, we want to treat people with courtesy and respect.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way to do that is by being there for them and hear them out, but also to see if we can use our journey to help others. And I think, as we were sharing before, Jim, it doesn't matter what challenges we are facing. In my case, it was alcohol that was my downfall. But I know many other in my community that have other issues. It can be everything from gambling, social media, sugar, food, or work, or other addictions that people are picking up. And there's support for all of them, and we can share, and people can learn from our journey from sobriety. It's transferable, according to me.
I like that. I like that very much. So we talked before we started the recording, Nick, that in my own humble opinion, that 12-step recovery is not about uh, alcohol or gambling, which was a second 12-step group formed, and then Narcotics Anonymous and so on. It's about having a change in your thoughts and a change in your actions. The first step is the only one that mentions addiction, and everyone is addicted to something, and we have to, first of all, acceptance. Acceptance is always the prelude to change. So tell us about that time in your life where you actually accepted something rather than resisting it.
Yeah, and it was particular then in 2018 when I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, as they say, and it was alcohol that really brought me to my knees, and I had to accept it. I had to ask for help, and I couldn't manage it anymore. Asking for help at that time for me meant I had to be hospitalized. I couldn't sober up myself. I needed to be hospitalized to get that proper detox. Once I had 72 hours under my belt, what I needed then was the community where I could belong, and that was the 12-step program for me. Uh, I was very, very happy to find that space, because what I learned in that world was that people were taking more ownership than I ever heard. People accepted the misfortunes that happened to them, and that was something that I wasn't used to. I mean, in my life, it was always playing, if anything, a victim card if something happened and so on. Here was more about taking ownership for it and looking at the situation and seeing how we could overcome it, which was a completely different approach for me. I can also say that then, being an expat that who had been laid off twice in my job, and being an expat sent abroad, being laid off, then you do not only lose your job, you lose also your house, you lose your work permit and everything else. And both times I was so unprepared for it. And the issue was that I felt victimized, and I spent all my energy being angry with the company. How could they do so? How could they do this? Instead of immediately accepting what had happened, which was already outside my control anyway, and just start working on, okay, what do I do now? What kind of new role can I find, and so on. I spent instead 6 months or 12 months going down in a black hole, feeling sorry for myself before I just realized what had happened. And I'm sharing that because there's a lot of people losing their jobs today. There's a lot of mergers, acquisitions, a lot of automation happening. And I think the best tip for anyone is just, as soon as you can, yes, talk it through, but then move to acceptance.
Well, we talk about when we have people, you're familiar in the 12-step world, people will tell their story and maybe play the victim, because a lot of people start off that way. But then one of the questions we ask them, Nick, is, what do you want to do about it? And we can, the only thing we can do is share what works in our lives, not telling them what to do. So, everybody runs into some type of a person that's very meaningful in their life in the 12-step world. I certainly had one. He passed about 5 years ago. So tell me about that person in your recovery life that actually kind of showed you the way.
Yeah, I remember it clearly because it was actually a female in this case, someone who I had studied with at university 20 years earlier. We had stayed in touch and just checked in a few times a year. And I could recall that she had gone through some crisis. She had had a mental health breakdown. She had some panic attacks, and also know that drugs and alcohol was involved. And she had recovered though, and I knew that she was sober. So when I was going through my challenging times, after I'd seen the doctor and after the detox, it was her I called, and I asked to meet up and talk to her. And it was by meeting her she introduced me then and gave me the phone number of some men in the recovery world who I reached out to, who then one of them met me a morning and took me to my first meeting. So the saving person here was indeed my female friend, who really took my call, who spoke to me that day when I was broken, but I was desperate for help. And I remember the words she said to me. As she looked at me at that time, she said, "Nick, you will be able to smile again. Just trust the process." And that's what I did. And that's the best thing that I ever done, because I know others who haven't done that. And sadly, a few of them are not with us today.
So she wrote you a prescription for hope.
Absolutely. And that prescription was to go to a meeting and get a sponsor and sober up, which is what I done.
Yes, yes, I love what you're saying. And one of the things that we do in the 12-step world, the Buddhists talk about the illusion of separateness. And we always try to think that we're different, that we can do this on our own, that self will can conquer any problem. And in the 12-step world, it's said that a life run on self will can hardly be a success. What's your thoughts about that, Nick?
Yeah, I certainly think that, too often in our lives, we think we have all the answers. But what I learned through the program was to really surrender to that and just trust the process and put my ego aside and look and listen to the people who've been there before. That was not something that I did. I tried to find my own answers and go my own way. And I guess that's, having moved around the world and jumping from place to place, I was always, as soon as I faced a challenge or issue, rather than accepting it, I changed the situation and tried to start all over. But then it was full circle again. So that was the big thing in the program was indeed it was acceptance, but also just to trust the process and shut up my own opinions and yeah, and then trust the higher power as well, of course.
Well, yes, the higher power, absolutely. You've heard this saying that you know how to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And we'll be coming back next week We'll be coming next week to continue this conversation with Nick. And I know you're waiting for a free prescription. It's fruits, nuts, and vegetables. Unplug your television and take up fishing. And for a truly mindful experience, try to fish without bait. Do a kindness for yourself and do a kindness for another. Forgive yourself and forgive another. If we're all not the Creator's children, and none of us are, till all are free, none are free. Namaste.
Please check out our website at fishingwithoutbait.com, where you can listen to the show, comment on our discussions, and find out where you can subscribe to our podcast. If you're interested in flying the colors of Fishing Without Bait, click the shop icon on our website. We have clothing, mugs, cell phone cases, and so much more. Show the world that you fish without bait. This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.